morning. I'm Michael Garcia of the Hispanic Vote, and we're going to be continuing our series of interviews here with community leaders, elected officials, and judges. Today's interviews are going to focus on the judicial system here, specifically in Broward County, and its effects on the community and the role of judges and the importance of the judges. So today we have Circuit Court Judge Dennis Bailey here with us. So Judge, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into the interview and talk a little bit, I like the people to know a little bit about the judge. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a native son of Broward. I was born and raised here, born in Broward General Hospital. I graduated from Poplar High School back in the early 70s.
Pompano.
Yeah. Went off to college and graduated from Florida Atlantic in Boca. I went to Nova Law School out in Davies. So I've been in this community for a long time. When I got out of law school, I went to work in the state attorney's office and was a prosecutor for about 9 years, 9.5 years.
Okay.
And then I went and did criminal defense work for another 5 years, so about 14 years in criminal. When I left state attorney's office, I joined my father and brother and practiced up in Pompano. So
Okay.
it was a family business for a while.
How is your father still with us or not?
He passed away a few years ago.
So how long was he?
I was elected in 14, so he lived long enough to see me
Okay.
elected. That was a good thing.
That was a good thing. How long was he practicing?
Over 50 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was former president of the Broward Bar.
Okay.
And he was well known in the community. I would walk into courtrooms and judges, old judges would see me and say, "Oh my gosh, you look like your father."
Okay.
And that was always a compliment.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. You went to law school. How long have you been a judge?
6 years. I was elected in 2014, got sworn in 15. So this
Okay.
is finishing my first term.
So you did it the hard way.
Right, I was elected. There was four candidates in the race. I was fortunate enough to make it to the runoff, and then I was successful in the runoff.
So can you tell the public a little bit of your duties and where do you sit now currently in the 17th Judicial Circuit?
Right now I'm in the family division.
Okay.
I've been in family and in criminal primarily. I've done civil cases, I've been in civil division, but most of my time has been in family and criminal.
And how do you like that?
I like it a lot. The issues that are important to me are addressed most often in family and criminal. I certainly respect the civil division and what those judges do, but my passion still lies with family and criminal.
You know, my opinion is family and criminal judges probably have the biggest effect on the county. I'm a civil litigator. I don't do criminal, and I don't do family because of what it entails. But my opinion is the judges in those divisions have the biggest impact on the community.
There seems to be a sharp edge of crisis going on in both those divisions, that in criminal somebody's locked up or somebody has suffered as a victim of a crime, and they're feeling that crisis. They want judgment, they want it yesterday. And in family, the crisis is ongoing. Somebody needs a problem today because we have a problem going on today. So they're both very immediate in their own way.
Okay. How many cases do you have?
Right now, around 800.
Okay.
And the shutdown because of the coronavirus is kind of thrown, things off track for a while. But for the months before that, we were effectively bringing down the case count. In criminal, every division I was in always brought down the case count. I've always been a big believer that the fewer cases, the more the attorneys have the opportunity to work on the cases. The more the opportunity the judge has to be familiar with the cases. You got over 1,000 cases, it's hard to remember who's doing what.
Yeah, no, you're right. How has the coronavirus affected your courtroom and moving cases along, and what adjustments have you made?
I think it's been remarkable what Broward's accomplished under Chief Judge Tudor, that we have moved forward in all of our divisions as effectively as possible, and I think family lent itself to moving ahead more seamlessly than the other divisions. In criminal, they had a heavy impact because they couldn't use any juries. In family, it's all bench trials. So we moved quickly into figuring out how we can have a system where we can do an evidentiary hearing, how we can get evidence, both photographic and video, as well as documents, how experts can testify, and how to do that seamlessly. And we've been very busy. The family judges, and I'm not speaking against the civil or criminal, but the family judges have been putting in full work weeks seamlessly from this, and it's been a blessing.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in the community?
I've done a lot of things. I've been in the game for a long time. I'm coming in on 40 years of being in the criminal profession. I mean, the legal profession. But so as I've gone from criminal work to civil work, my involvement in various aspects of the community has changed. Early on, I was involved heavily with like teaching at the police academy and teaching law students. When I got into civil, one of the things that happened was I had children with special needs.
Okay.
So I shifted my focus into special needs interest, and
Okay.
my wife and I helped families with special needs, developing special needs trusts and caring for their future.
Okay.
And fighting for the kids in the school system so they're getting the right education. So
Okay.
it's shifted from not year to year, but from position to position as to where my focus was.
How many boys do you have?
I have 3 sons.
Okay. How old are they?
One's 27, the other is 19 and 17.
Okay. What type of, if you don't mind asking, what type of special needs do your kids have?
They're on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
And how we define the autism spectrum has been shifting from year to year. We used to use labels like Asperger's, but we don't use that anymore.
Okay.
It's high functioning autism kind of thing. One of the things I learned early, as every parent of an autistic child learns, is that for every autistic child, there's an autistic child. I mean, each child is autistic on his own.
Okay.
There's no commonality really. There's
They're very,
trends.
they're very unique.
They're very unique.
Okay.
And one of the blessings I had in working with families with kids with special needs is if you're thinking you're having a bad day, and then you sit down with a client who's having a worse day, you count your blessings. Because unfortunately, there are some kids on the spectrum who were very aggressive, hurting others or hurting themselves, or kids who are runners and are runaways and things like that. So that each one takes his own demands. One of the things that I recognized through the family division is, while unfortunately a lot of Americans get divorced, maybe it's a 50-50 chance of getting divorced in their first marriage. For autistic families, it's 80%.
Wow.
It's very hard on the parents.
Okay.
Autism is not typically a one symptom issue with a child. You have a child who's lost their eyesight, that's a symptom. You have a child who's lost their hearing or is lame, that's a symptom. With autism, it's often combined with other problems. There's a leaky gut syndrome, there's attention deficit disorder, there's obsessive compulsive behavior, there's autism, there's epilepsy. And so that the challenge to the parent is huge, and it weighs heavily on the relationship.
So with that, is there something within the court system, in the family division, that has a special unit for maybe families that are experiencing that?
Not a special unit, but you begin to know who are the experts in the community that can help these families deal with the new normal. We try to discourage them from seeing themselves as victims of an unfortunate circumstance, but rather your family has a new normal. You're going to be different than the other families on the street. Your expectations of your children, the nature of your weekend activities, the nature of your parenting is going to be different. You have a new normal. Let's identify it, embrace it, and move forward.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit of how you feel the judge's role in the community and how it affects society as a whole?
I think the biggest challenge for judges is to understand what when the citizens come in, they have their own subjective expectations of what is fair, what is just. To try to understand that and address the issue, to maybe explain to them or educate them on what are the limitations on their expectations. So that the more we can get out into the community and make ourselves available to the community, so they feel confident the judges are not just sitting, you know, in the courthouse and not in touch with us. Go out and talk to them about what are the expectations of family court versus civil court versus criminal versus probate and so on.
What's your opinion on when the courts are gonna be open again to the public? Do you have? and I know you're not the chief judge.
No, it isn't that. It's just that I don't know that anybody has that answer. I don't know if the folks dealing with that issue in Washington D.C. have that answer yet. It's a balancing act, a precarious balancing act of protecting the health and well-being of the citizens, while trying to get the justice system back on tracks where it's moving forward at full speed. Slowing down the justice system for the sake of protecting the citizens makes sense. The question is, when does that end? And how much of that question is scientific versus other concerns for the community? There's a lot of people suffering in the criminal court system because of the lack of access to the courts. And it's civil as well. So that it's trying to find that proper balance. You don't want to rush back in, put people at risk, and then having a second wave come through, so to speak, and you were part of the problem instead of part of the solution.
Do you think during this crisis, because as you said, family is always an ongoing issue in most, do you think this crisis has affected those cases where you're getting less of them or more of them, or you're getting more attorneys filing pleadings and stuff?
Not more attorneys filing pleadings. Our fear was, we had heard from across the pond, from England, that they had a surge in domestic violence.
Okay.
And our concern was, in a situation where the family is cooped up at home, the kids are not in school, especially when there's multiple children, they have multiple at-home or online education requirements, and maybe mom and dad are not earning the income they used to earn because they're out of a job. That is a percolating teapot of pressure, and are we going to see a surge in domestic violence? And so far we haven't seen it, and that's been wonderful.
Okay, that's a good.
That's been our concern about, are we going to see a push of cases involving unfortunate circumstances?
Are you doing a lot of your work remotely or in the courthouse? How is?
I get online at 8:45 in the morning. I'm on Zoom. I take an hour and a half for lunch, and I usually get out of there between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. I'm on Zoom all day.
All day.
And fortunately for us, like I said, we've had full trials, full evidentiary trials.
Do you think there's going to be some change in the justice system as practicing attorneys? Because I'm an attorney and you're a judge, but you know we were used to the old way.
Correct.
Now we have the Zoom and a lot of Zoom meetings where most of the time attorneys are in court. But do you think this is somewhat of a positive maybe for the practice moving forward, or there's going to be some adjustment?
I don't think we'll ever go back to what was before March 1.
Okay.
I think there's a new world in place. I think the attorneys who have to travel a good distance to come to the courthouse, not necessarily from Miami-Dade or Palm Beach County, but even the attorneys out in Weston or the attorneys in Coral Springs, if they got a 5-minute hearing at the courthouse, do they really need to drive all the way in, or can they Zoom that 5-minute hearing? And now, since we've done Zoom effectively, why not use that system? And so I think you're going to see more of that kind of an interplay going on about, let's use the technology we've now developed, let's use it to good advantage.
We've been forced into it. So
right.
So now it's.
The other interesting issue is that if we're going to open gradually, what is it going to look like when we open? What is it, for instance, I've got a high-profile case coming up that's supposed to happen in June, and every time we have a Zoom hearing, I've got 7 or 8 people that are observing. Not the parties, not the lawyers, other people that are observing on Zoom. They're muted, they're off camera, but they're watching and they're listening. When we move into the courtroom and we have a social distancing obligation, are those people gonna be precluded from watching?
That's an
Because they have to sit outside because we don't have enough seats inside to accommodate social distancing. Do we then turn the Zoom camera on the courtroom so they can sit at home and watch the hearing going on? You know, and so there are other questions that, as we reopen and bring in a hybrid kind of a system, how does it work? What does it look like?
That is a really interesting point that I didn't think about. That is correct, that public access, and obviously, you know, the Supreme Court of the United States never does anything,
Right.
with Zoom or anything, but that is interesting that, yeah, now, if it's, you know, the courts are available to the public, why can't?
And we were also concerned about the jurors that are summoned to come in, how many will honor it?
Okay.
How many will come in and justifiably claim they have a financial hardship, I can finally go back to work, I can't sit here, I gotta go back to work,
Yeah.
and so on. So it's gonna be, the rest of 2020 will continue to be a challenge.
Do you think it's been a benefit, because I had one judge tell me that some of the pro se litigants, it seems like they're more accustomed and they feel a little bit more at ease doing the Zoom hearing than being in court. And I'm just,
No,
from your experience.
it's been remarkable. It's
Okay.
been remarkable that, I expected we would have all kinds of problems with pro se litigants on Zoom, and it turns out we haven't. They've been very, very adept at showing up and whether they're in their car, on their cell phone, because it is a format that can happen just about anywhere. I've had circumstances, for instance, where, a parent shows up on Zoom in the car, I can see the child in the car seat in the back. And we're gonna be talking about that child today, so that child can't be within earshot of what we're talking about.
Okay.
So I have her step out of the car, and there was another adult in the car that stayed with the child, and the mother walks out and handles the Zoom that way, so that the situations have been varied and causing judges to, you know, think on the fly, so to speak, but it's been workable.
Yeah, because the other judge told me that it seems like the participants that were pro se were a little bit more at ease. They didn't have that tension of being in court, and they were a little bit more relaxed because they were in a comfortable environment, and they were able to now communicate their needs or concerns a little bit easier.
That has been a value, along with all the other circumstances of coming to the courthouse, the paying for the parking, the taking the time off from work,
All the hustle bustle.
going through the security system, finding the right courtroom, all of that's been taken out of play, so it's been very effective for them. And I've had a fair number of pro se's who were fortunate enough to have a teenager to help them figure out how to work this system.
Yeah, so talking about that Zoom, have you had any issues with attorneys?
In the early days, we did, but that dissipated quickly, and I gotta say that, things have been great
Okay.
recently. And it takes some adjustment. It takes a while to really appreciate you're on camera. This is not a phone call. You're, for all intents and purposes, in the courtroom. The Zoom system is great. It's enabled us to do what we're doing, but it's got a lot of drawbacks as far as running a trial, running a hearing. For instance, the microphone goes to whoever's making the most noise.
Yes, because it kind of.
And so if the witness is testifying and the attorney starts typing up notes, the microphone will go to the keypad typing, so now I can't hear the witness. And, or witness is talking, another attorney raises an objection, the microphone never leaves the witness, so the objection never gets heard, and we have to come up with rules, so any objection made, you raise your hand, that's gonna be an objection, I'll consider it contemporaneous with the problem.
Okay.
You know, so you gotta come up with different kind of dynamics, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any message for the public or kids, anybody who wants to be an attorney?
As, in general?
In general.
You know, one of the things that, my father was an attorney and he had 6 kids, 3 of us became attorneys. One of the things that he taught us is the advantage of being an attorney is twofold. Number one, you're making your living with your brains. So that if you get hurt in an accident or you break a leg or you throw your back out, you still make a living with your brains. And second of all, is that attorneys are necessary in every aspect of society. Attorneys people need attorneys on the way up, people need attorneys on the way down. So that it's a great profession that puts me in touch with a lot of different people. In practicing law for 28 years before I got on the bench, I've tried cases from Key West to Pensacola, state and federal, prosecution and defense, civil plaintiff and defense, and met just more people than I ever would have had I chosen another profession. So that to me, it's been just a pleasure.
You know, and what your father said is really true about you using your brain. I used to work with an attorney that ended up being physically disabled because of some issue, but he was still able to practice because it didn't affect his brain. It was
Right.
Physically, he was able to do certain things, but his brain is what we use. So it's a great advantage compared to some other jobs that you physically have to be able to move and do stuff. So yes, that is a good point.
I think we've all had the experience of seeing somebody in our courtroom and ask them how old they are, and they're my age or younger, but they look like they've been, doing hard labor for many years, and it takes a toll on the body. So that I'm very happy with my choice.
No. I've seen that too. The other day I was before the corona thing, I was in North Carolina, and the guy said, "I'm gonna be 50," and I looked at him like, "Oh my God." But he was doing hard labor. But Judge, I want to thank you for coming out, for interviewing with us, letting us know a little bit of your background, and we appreciate it.